So ladies, tell us, is this your first time at the GLAAD Awards?
No, this is my second time attending the GLAAD Awards here at the Waldorf Astoria in New York.
This is my first time, so I'm not quite as cool as Daniela.
So tell us about your latest projects that you're working on.
So I am a part of MTV's Proudest Moments special, which is highlighting pretty much all the, like, I guess, like, most successful. I'm not really familiar with the brand, but, like, it is highlighting pretty much people who've been involved in the Viacom network that's dealt with, like, LGBT-specific, like, material in terms of uplifting LGBT youth. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and so we were both interviewed as part of that special. And basically what it's doing is looking back on all of the work that MTV has been doing around LGBT issues, like since the 90s, right? I remember watching The Real World when I was a kid, and it was like the first time I ever saw an HIV-positive person on television who was portrayed in a human way, right? So I think it's looking back on all of those moments, which we were lucky enough to be part of.
Now, what else would you be working on? Like, what else do you do? Are you actresses, models, what?
Okay, so I would say I'm a public speaker, also like a global innovator, right?
Yes.
Like, because like I'm creating not only content but also like sustainable resources for LGBT marginalized youth across the globe, and really looking at how we portray LGBT youth in media, as well as connecting them with mentors who are going to potentially give them tangible resources that trickle down to their peers who are still affected by like these intersecting components that oppress them, right? And so for me, I use my narrative to not only remind youth who are living in marginalized communities, but those youth who are trying to get access to tangible resources. Like, this is how we can redefine our narrative, by being resilient and resistant to these heteronormative narratives that try to erase us. And one of my like favorite quotes I feel that I wrote is that I feel very, very lucky to be seen in a world that tried to erase me. And I just, if I can send a message to any LGBT youth or any trans youth out there who feels that the world is trying to erase them, I want them to know that we are standing with you, we see you, and even if we're not there with you going through the adversity, we acknowledge it, and we want to be a part of that revolutionary movement that's going to free you.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for all that work that you're doing. And you're such a young lady.
Yeah, I'm 21.
You could be modeling or acting, but you're an advocate.
No, I've done.
Wow.
I know.
Funny I should say that.
Well, I am. I have done a lot of work over in Germany in terms of starting my own like global foundation that works specifically in like communities like Berlin and Sweden and Zurich and Santa Fe. I went down to Santa Fe and started a collective that pretty much helps fund any kind of like trans initiative in New Mexico. I've given over 3 TED Talks on that like global platform to help LGBT youth and specifically trans youth of color see a reflection of themselves on an innovative platform, right? And reminding them like, hey, like we don't always have to sound like we went to Harvard in order to find resources, right? Like, so whether you have education or not, you matter. And I guess I've just been working very hard partnering with many organizations to remind not only LGBTQ but these organizations that there are youth who are willing to engage in the hard conversation. And if we don't create space for these youth, how do they know about the opportunities and resources that are available to them? And so I love like networking and like just pretty much collaborating with people from all walks of life, because I'm one to know like so many people get so focused on like binary and gender binary, and I'm one like, even though I'm presenting in front of you now like a conforming I'm conforming to a gender perceived as female, there's times where I wake up and I don't want to wear, you know what I mean, like my like extensions. I don't want to wear a dress, right? And I have that right to be able to present myself the way I want to. That's and right. Whether you think if I went and like undergone medical transition that makes me a woman, I want you to know no surgery can make anyone the gender that they were inherently feeling they were. And so that's another reminder, you know, that I just want to put out there, like my transition is not this standardized view of what trans look like.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Brainy and beautiful.
Yeah, I think
your work, what else do you do?
So Sure, we can move a little closer. So I'm also a writer and working on a few different writing projects right now after the True Life episode and after all of this work with MTV. So I'm working on my first book proposal because I'm trying to write a sort of coming of age story about how I came into my identity as a genderqueer and non-binary person, and also trying to write a book that's really accessible for folks, right? I want like homemakers in Arkansas to be able to read my book and feel like they understand the experience, because so often genderqueer and non-binary people are talked about as sort of this broad conceptual idea, right? We're talked about like an academic concept, not like real human experiences. And so I want to write a book that shares some of those experiences and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, because, you know, I think one thing that's really incredible about our identities as trans people is that we have so many incredible things to say about femininity, and so many incredible things to say about gender more generally that we've learned as trans people that applies to everybody, right? Like, I think that we have so much to share, and so I'm just working on trying to help make that happen. I'm also collaborating on a few different pilot TV projects. Nothing is official yet, but I'm working on a treatment for a talk show that I'm hoping to host. We're still trying to figure out where the home for it's going to be, but we've filmed a pilot teaser episode and all that kind of stuff, so we're going to start shopping that around, and then also working on another project with some other non-binary and genderqueer folks, and seeing if we can kind of you know, like stir the pot a little bit and expand this from just kind of a documentary space into other kinds of medium, right? Because I think that, you know, trans people and genderqueer people, we shouldn't just be the subject of documentaries. We should be able to host a goddamn TV show, right? We should be able to act in a TV show. We should be able to be the screenwriters. We should be able to be the showrunner. We should be able to be the star of it, and we should be able to center our narratives and not have to apologize for doing that.
And
so
not only being exceptional narratives, right? I think like that's a key component that many people forget, right? Like, so just because you may not necessarily conform to a certain gender binary, but you have this level of articulation that deems you, like, in a sense, like appropriate or like accessible to have the conversation. That's not always the narratives we need put out there in media. I think we need to, like you said, right, like showing a real, live, authentic narrative. Because the reality is, what are we saying to trans women who don't have the access that me and you necessarily have, who don't have access to healthcare? Who don't have access to designer clothes, but they're just looking for a clean t-shirt to wear tonight. You know what I mean? So I feel like we got to be mindful of the messages that we're sending out to them, and in a sense, right, creating, again, sustainable, tangible, trickling down resources that they can actually get access to. Because if it doesn't get in the hands of these youth who's marginalized, what is it any good for us who have the platform to just continue to talk about it without actually servicing those populations?
I think it's that. I totally agree with that, right? And I think it's really important that we, even at the GLAAD Awards, talk about the fact that visibility is never enough, right? Visibility is only the very, 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 very beginning of a broad political transformation. Because, like, the fact that I'm on TV doesn't mean that genderqueer kids are safe everywhere all of a sudden, right? It doesn't mean that parents understand what's going on. It doesn't mean that genderqueer and gender nonconforming and trans people aren't still very poor and still have difficulty getting access to jobs and employment, and still have difficulty getting access to healthcare, and still have difficulty getting access to housing, and still have difficulty getting access to basic fundamentals in life, right? Like, the fact that we have some people who have made it in our quote unquote in our community, right? Because let's be real about how much a lot of this work pays. Like, you know, just because there's been some people who have been visible doesn't mean that we're done. It's only like the very beginning of the little like snowball rolling down the hill, hopefully.
Why? Thank you.
Just last remark I wanted to make is that when you said visibility, right, I wanted just to remind folks, right, like how last year was a historic moment for us in terms of media and just our platforms, in terms of what trans visibility looks like. But that did not keep 21 like people from murdering 21 of our brothers and sisters. Just this year alone, within like the first 2 months, over 7 trans people were murdered. And so I think we need to keep in mind that, again, like visibility is not also awareness, but that is not the solution to creating, like, in a sense, affirmative and safe communities. You know what I mean? We are a part of a movement that should, in a sense, uplift everyone, right? Like, so it shouldn't be, again, race specific, class specific, or gender specific, because everyone is in need in this community. And I think, again, too, maybe holding people accountable who have been making a nice quantity of money out of this movement and equity from it. And I think it is maybe holding us accountable in this space tonight by saying, like, hey, you need to start providing not only just resources, but the funding that's needed to give these youth sustainable futures, right? Like, Because giving them a Metro card and a Subway sandwich card is not helping them when they still have to engage in survival sex work.
Yeah,
right.
And that's where, you know, some of the work that I do outside of my media work and outside of my work as a writer, I work at an LGBTQ international foundation called the Astoria Lesbian Foundation for Justice, and we're the largest foundation for exclusively LGBTQ issues in the world. And we give out grants specifically for people who are trying to do that kind of important, sustainable, livelihood-building work all around the world. And so I think, you know, it is so important that we stay grounded in not just the glamour of this, but the real work of it.
Right. There's so much to be done, and thank you, ladies, for leading the way and, you know, taking us in a good way. Thank you. Mwah.